Feeling like an outsider is far more common than most people admit. And that applies to men just as much as women, even if they don't always admit it or say it out loud. Our guest today, Alma Derricks, empowers the adventurous leaders and global brands to uncover blind spots and think beyond conventional limits. And she has worked with an impressive range of both traditional and creative companies. So she brings deep insight into what it takes to grow through change. And even if you don't see yourself as an adventurous leader, this conversation will challenge that insecure voice many of us need to unlearn, helping to embrace the creative thinking, self leadership, and the courage it takes to pivot successfully into what's next. So stay tuned. You've spent years building what matters. Now, with Power of After courses and elite mentorship, it's time to move forward with intention and impact. This is the Power of After show. Let's get started. Well, hello. It's great to have Alma here. I'm so happy that we get to connect this way. I get to meet people all over the world through these podcasts and our Power of After show. And today, I'm excited that we're going to touch on many of the ways that you have worked with traditional companies like Deloitte, and also creative like, Cirque du Soleil. I mean, it's totally different. And I come from a creative field, so I'm very interested to hear that sort of mindset. And I like our guests to first kind of give your own little bit spiel of your background to begin with, and then we'll kind of dive on in.
Sure, Deborah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation. So I appreciate you reaching out. A little about me. Well, you sort of hit the two poles of my career, right? I don't think there are anything that's further apart than, say, Deloitte and Cirque du Soleil. But in general, if I were to draw a through line through it, if you think about, I've been at it about 30 years. Seen a lot of disruptions, as I like to remind people. This is which disruption are we in now, right? In 30 years, there have been one right after another. And I think in addition to slaloming between those consulting roles and kind of business roles and creative things, I think the through line is I really love working with brands and helping them figure out what their next act is, especially when the market shifts. So if you go all the way back to the early internet, the Jurassic days of the internet, I was
very
helping,
visual.
right, ages and ages ago when dinosaurs walked the earth, back when AOL and Prodigy walked the earth. I was helping brands like Peanuts and Dilbert, and ultimately Star Trek get online for the very first time. And so they were asking the exact same questions we're asking now about AI. What is this thing? What is this internet thing? What are we going to do? And it's really, it's a really interesting form of entrepreneurship. It's not so much about building from scratch all the time, but I tend to work with existing things. And they've sort of run out of paved road, and there's this new world out in front of them. And I just love that white space. I love that maybe it's a sickness, I don't know. I like that kind of open field in front of me, that green space, white space. And I really do like trying to figure out what makes a brand or a company tick so that you can really narrow down what the opportunities are for that brand. Back in the day, for example, Dilbert was not the number one comic strip in the world. Peanuts was probably held that crown. And, I saw pretty clearly that on the very, very earliest versions of the internet, Peanuts wasn't going to be relevant right away because of the audience that was there. The earliest people online were all technology workers. It was every IT department around the world. And Dilbert was their little patron saint. They loved this character. And I said to the team I was working with, this is going to be the breakout. And then as the rest of the world, as all the civilians get online, things like Peanuts will follow.
Mhm.
But that was really shocking when Peanuts was a billion-dollar brand and Peanuts and, Dilbert was this little up-and-comer. So, I that theme, I think, is carried out. Building all that work back in the early days is still one of the most fun things I've ever done, but it's led me to a career where I was kind of constantly, either in a company or advising to a company, but helping them look out on the horizon, and it's been a lot of fun. They complement each other in ways that I think make sense in my head, but, but somewhere between those 2, I think it comes down to that kind of insight and just getting underneath the skin of a
Mm.
company and a brand and understanding their audience well enough to understand what the permissions are.
I really like the fact that you are asking the questions and your term of slaloming was so great. I wrote that
The
down.
wind blowing.
Just
Yeah, the wind blowing and
yes.
everything.
My husband did this AI thing of both of us. He had a picture of both of us, and we haven't skied in a while, but he has one of us going perfectly from side to side. Of
There it
course,
is.
we're in t-shirts, because it's AI,
Of
but it
course.
was so funny. We looked just like so cool. I said, "Oh, we need to show this to our
I
kids."
love it.
How good
I
we were.
love that.
No, they know the truth. But yeah, but going back and forth
Yeah.
is, but you're asking the questions too. So I think that's an important point to bring that up
Mhm.
because we get so self-focused and we're going, okay, how do we change? But you are asking those questions. And when you run out of paved road, as you said,
Mhm.
all of a sudden, okay, so where do you go? Where do you turn? Where's the direction? So, and that really kind of hit my first little a point and question of this because those type of companies are so different, but yet there are many similarities because you're still asking some of the same questions, and it doesn't matter if you're a creative business or if you're an accounting business or whatever you are. You've got that mindset of asking those important questions, and I think that's important because a lot of us forget the importance of being that others centered and just gaining that sort of information. So you're going to talk about some superpowers too. Is that one of your superpowers that
Yeah,
you
I think that's fair to say. I mean, the first thing is not being terrified by the questions, right? I mean, I think most people are
yes.
terrified by change. I think that's a
Mhm.
common thing, and so I think the first superpower is sort of running toward it, and you're running toward the fire instead of away from it. I think that's a bit of a wiring that I have. But to your question about the difference between a place like Cirque and Deloitte, I mean, certainly the line business, the accounting side of the business of Deloitte is much more conservative. But I was in the consulting group. I was a strategist
Mm.
in the consulting group. So actually, even though the company is relatively mature, the projects changed every day. There were no 2
Ah.
days alike at Deloitte, and
Mhm.
I think one of the interesting things about being in big consulting is the dog years of seeing so many companies and so many situations in a way that you could never have jobs like that. You could never
Right.
start jobs every 6 weeks or 8
Right.
weeks or 6 months. And so you get a chance to really see a lot in a very compact period of time. You also get used to being an enterer, like
Ooh.
every time you start a new project, you're sort of
Mhm.
starting from scratch again, right? So
Yeah.
there has to be a certain amount of comfort with that, that just diving out of a plane into the unknown, that has to appeal to you because you're not only going into something unknown, but more often than not, you're going to something very high stakes as well.
Ah,
And
wow.
so I think that, the inherent creativity in that, I mean, not just the artistic creativity, but the agility and
Mhm.
the nimbleness to be able to
Mm.
do that is something that I know companies struggle with. I hear it all the time. We're sort of stuck and you're sort of fighting an inertia that says,
Mhm.
every company that starts as a teenager and starts as a
Mhm.
baby and a teenager, by the time they're midlife,
Uh-huh.
right? They have more to lose, they have more at risk, and so I think it's easier. I've learned a lot of empathy for, reaching a certain stage and having a number of laps behind you, whether you're a business, whether you're a person. It's easy to just start playing not to win, playing not to
Mm.
lose instead of really saying, I'm going to go for it, you have
Mhm.
more to lose at that.
Wow.
A startup, a disruptive young startup
Mm.
can break every rule and
Wow.
get away with it. You can't do that if you're Procter and Gamble, if you're Mattel, if you are, companies that have an established footprint, have a history, they're risk averse. And so you're always, I think every company reaches a point where they need to grow, they need to be responsive to the environment around them. But we're seeing it right now with AI.
Well,
They don't know what to do, and this thing is just barreling toward them. And you maintain, you maintain a posture of trying to simplify, of trying
mhm,
to create efficiencies, to create a standard way of doing things, and the people who come
mm.
along with that ride with you are not change oriented. They are maintain the status quo oriented. And so now when a change comes, you don't even have the right people in place.
Wow.
I mean, Deborah, I will tell you, just going back a bit to those early internet days, I remember distinctly that
Mm.
I worked with a lot of people in the 90s who were pioneers like that. Whether we were smart or not had nothing to do with
Mhm.
it, but we were adventurous.
Yes.
And when the internet crashed in 2000, they were summarily punished by the companies they tried to go back to. You would think companies would say, well,
Mhm,
you're kind of a pioneer, you learned some things, bring it back.
mhm.
They were slapped on the wrists and punished for being prodigal children. And a
Wow.
lot of them never came back into
Mm.
companies. And so what I saw fast forward, from that time in the 2000s to when I joined Deloitte in 2008, what I saw distinctly were that some of the managers that stayed in those companies that never ventured out, never went out on
Mhm.
a new frontier, were now vice presidents and they were running divisions. And
Mm.
they were unable to
Change.
make decisions about lunch without a
Yes.
committee or a rubric. And so companies almost got stripped
Mhm.
of all of their most adventurous people, the ones that would be in the back of the room going, wait, 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 how come and
Right.
why don't we just? And I don't understand why
Yes.
we do this. That's stupid. All those people sort of bolted to go to see what this new internet
Wow.
thing was about, and they never
Yeah.
came back, and companies never welcomed them back. So we're now in a multiple generation cycle
Mhm.
of people who are really, really risk averse, and it's
Mhm.
not wrong, but it's
Yeah.
it's a tough posture to be in when the sands are moving under your feet like they are,
Wow.
right?
And I tell you what, you've gotta be able to take risks today. But
100%, 100%.
yeah, 100%, and so it's very, very difficult. The market's changing fast. You've got AI coming. You've got not just coming, it is here, 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 big time. But not just that, you need the human element, and you've
Yeah,
got to be able to take some of those risks, and that it feels like creativity a bit because you've got to, step out of your just normal little box,
yeah.
and all of that. So is that part of what you mean by you talk about unlearning?
Mm,
With this. We'll get back to, you can kind of slip in some of those superpowers in here too. But
sure.
um, but the unlearning of everything that college, business schools, because a lot of people that have been in that management, they have a single way of doing that. They've read the books, they've done all of this, pursuit of excellence, they've done, all of that, and
Mm,
there's so much out there. Those business books that have been around, but now if it's a new normal, how do they adjust, and what sort of things, what are those mindsets? It's a mindset.
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there's sort of 2 layers to that question. I
Mm.
think,
Yeah.
what a lot of, what a lot of school is a different game. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
School is
Yes,
sort of a
I agree.
different
I agree.
it just has a different cadence. You win at school in a
Yes,
completely different way than you win in business.
totally.
So I think there are
Totally.
fundamental things like, meritocracy, like
Okay.
social promotion, like, long answers to questions instead of short answers to questions.
Yep. Yep.
I think good students who learn to win at school get blindsided by the way the
Ah.
world works. They would never think about the politics of lobbying for an A. They do great
Hmm.
work and they get you get a star and you get
Right.
promoted and you get a tassel and all sorts of
Hmm.
prizes and things at the
Right.
end. And so I think you lose track of kind of the tournament that
Hmm.
business is and sort of playing all the aspects of it. You would never think about, the politics of trying to work a professor. Maybe some people would, but I think
Yeah.
people who are great at the school game get rewarded for being, attentive and smart and
Mhm.
diligent. And so you come out and you're sort of lost. And I think
Mhm.
that when you get to B school, the bigger problem
Mhm.
is, I think you addressed some of this. The problem is that um, it's sort of a different problem
Mhm.
in that the people, the educators in business schools, many of whom haven't ever run a business, are trying to decipher this world that they've just
Totally.
never lived in. And so
Yes.
in school, if you want to
Mhm.
be a professor,
Mhm.
you have a treasure trove of people who can tell you what that path is, how it works, how to
Yes.
get a PhD, how to get
Mhm.
tenure.
Mhm.
They know one industry, really. You
Mm.
have to think of it
Mhm.
that way. They're not multi-tools. They're not,
Mhm.
uh, Swiss Army knives about everything out in the
Mhm.
world. And so as a student, you have to sort of make that transition and realize that there are other places to learn that. And then you make a great point about just the tools and the stories, anything that's written in the textbooks about
Mhm.
strategy or anything. This
Mhm.
has to be learned in the trenches.
Yes.
And I did an MBA, and I think it
Mhm.
was absolutely valuable to me
Yes.
to specifically back to the theme we were talking about earlier,
Mm.
to learn how to think horizontally about
Yes.
what the business lessons are that
Mhm.
are common to every
Right.
business. So,
Right.
I remember sulking when, the
Mhm.
topic of the day, the case of the day wasn't something I was
Yeah.
interested in.
Mhm.
But by doing airlines and bicycles and, rutabagas
Mhm. Mhm.
and media and whatever, you start to the
Mhm.
practice of starting to see the commonalities, to see the through lines. That's the thing that expands your mind as a
Yes.
business person and helps you with that with that agility that you need,
Mhm.
because you're not so wed to this is how we've done it in this industry,
Mhm.
in this company. You don't have the same blinders.
Yeah.
You're thinking,
Mhm.
always thinking sort of in an ecosystem way
Yes.
and looking at how all the pieces move. And I think that, to your point about change, I think one of the things that makes change hard is if you've been sort of looking
Right.
this way at the
Right.
world,
Mhm.
you don't even have a muscle that imagines these other
Right.
possibilities around you, and so your
Mhm.
muscles are weak when it
Yes.
comes to just even asking the question. I remember a long time ago, there's a great book called Art of the Long View that's now
Yes.
20, 30 years old,
Yeah.
Peter Schwartz's book, and, some of it's, definitely of a time because but the book is about, some of the early people who were scenario planners at
Mhm.
Royal Dutch Shell, for example,
Mhm.
and how by doing tabletop exercises,
Mhm.
they at least exercise the muscle of what if? What if there's a major
Yes.
disaster? What if this happens? And so when real disaster strikes, it's not completely new to you. And so his
Right.
book, it's a little book, great read, is about how to
Yeah.
stretch your POV. And he talked about things as simple as going to a magazine stand back in the Jurassic days and grabbing a magazine you've never seen that you would never buy naturally
Yeah.
and read it cover to cover. Today, you could
Yeah.
do that with a website or you could do it with
Mhm.
AI. Like, just
Mhm.
read all about, fly fishing if it's something you
Right.
know nothing about, and just sort of train yourself
Yeah.
to stretch and have a broader POV. And I think it's something can be learned as we talk about superpowers. There are definitely
Mhm.
folks, I'm one of them,
Mhm.
who gravitates to that. I'm sort of wired
Mhm.
for it.
Yeah.
It is,
Mhm.
sick as that might be. But I do think you can be more deliberate about
Mhm.
helping yourself pick your head up and just sort of see the larger picture around you. And that's what's gonna help you think too about how to pivot with your skills that you have. We
Exactly.
talk so much about transferable skills, right? And I think
Right.
people have a hard
Mhm.
time seeing what their superpowers are, and you
Mhm.
you really do need outsiders to help you see it. That's my advice.
Right.
Um
That, reflection.
yeah,
Yeah.
we
Mhm.
take for granted some of the things that we do well, but
Right.
ask people, but be
Mhm.
selective about the people that you ask. You want
Of
people that are
course.
trying to give
Yeah.
you good advice,
Trustworthy.
are
Yes.
and that are
Exactly.
knowledgeable about the thing,
Right. And who you
but
are. Yes. Uh-huh.
I've had to stop people that I was working
Mhm.
with for saying, I'm always the one that kinda gets people rallied together, and I
Mhm.
slow-mo them, and I pause them, and I say, "Wait a minute, you realize that's not a given, that
Mhm.
you're the person who sits in the middle, you're the diplomat, you're the one who can rally
Right.
teams of people. You
Right.
do know that that's special, right?
Mhm.
You do
Yeah.
know
Right. Right.
that that's not something everybody just does naturally, and so
Right.
it takes someone from the outside to hear your story and
Right.
help you sort through those things. I think that's
Right.
really helpful in identifying them because the superpowers are the things that you really do in your sleep.
Right,
And it's
definitely.
it's easy to take those for granted.
Right, right. A couple points here.
Yeah.
First of all, you can get different magazines at airports. So yes,
Well,
there's
that too, yeah. Yes, you can.
and when you were talking about, real life, I've had a number of interns, college interns, and
Mhm.
usually in the arts, the music field, and I know it's just, if you want to go teaching, fine, but usually they go into other fields. It's
Mhm.
just a very tough field unless you're going to
Sure.
teach full time. But, we have grown up also with a whole generation of participation trophies. And they've had all of this, oh, you're doing so well, da 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 da. But, yeah, I married a professional athlete. A
Mm.
participation trophy is not going to get you on a professional team. I am so sorry. And there's so many of these organizations, you get trophy after trophy. Oh, you came in
Yeah.
first, you did such, you get it. But I mean, you get out in that real world, it is so different, especially in the arts, but almost any area. But you can kind of find little areas in other areas. But if you're in performance or anything, there's a lot of pressure. You get hurt, you get anything happens. So, there's a lot to that of the real life and taking those risks and reinventing and to be able to get really into that real world. And so the art of the long view, great suggestion there for that little book. But it really comes down to how important it is for our mindset to be flexible that way, and that's an extremely important, and our mindsets. And you talk about somebody who's been in business, 'cause a lot of people are just thinking, okay, what do I do next? What's my
Mhm.
next step? And I have interviewed a lot and actually have a lot of colleagues. They've been in the corporate world. I've not come from corporate. I'm a lifetime entrepreneur. I've done I've taught every single level, including graduate school. I have performed internationally. Done major headline shows. I've written a number of things. So I come from a different aspect and different field. So I know what that feels like to be an entrepreneur. And I know what it feels like to restart. But there are a lot of people that say, okay, I think I want to be a consultant. And there's a lot of competition, a lot of people who've done the same thing. I get books mailed to me. Oh, I just wrote a book and it's all about, your second act and your second half. And,
Yeah.
it's one after the other, after the other. And I know because I talk to those people really the second or third. It's the next steps is what I talk because I
Right.
wanna help you maximize your skills, and I know how to do that, but how do you set yourself apart, and where do you even begin if you need to make a change and you've been in that situation? All of a sudden, it's a different world, but you've worked on both sides of those, so what do you say to that?
Sure. I mean, and it builds completely on what we were just talking about. I mean, I think one of the first things is you have to draw on things that are superpowers. This is
Yes.
not a moment for your B game and your C game, and I'm kind of okay at that other little thing on the side.
Mhm. Yes,
If you are intending on going out into the world and selling that, you're selling that as value, as key insight that you have, it has to be your A game, whatever that thing is,
right.
right?
Mhm.
But then the thing that I always caution people, and I get a lot of questions like this, Deborah, people come to me all the time or are
Mhm.
referred to me who are thinking about like moving from corporate into some kind of
Mhm.
solo consulting,
Definitely.
especially in a second act. And
Yes.
I always have to caution it's not enough to be a subject matter expert. You have to be you have to be focused on that and you have to find that as the core starting point. But there's so much about consulting and I've come to realize that I think it's because consultants at a place like Deloitte in big consulting make it look easy that you don't see all the things that go on in the back room. If you were my client, you would see me being very bright with my deck and all my great ideas,
Yeah.
standing and holding forth in a meeting and answering your questions and being very seamless. You don't see what it takes to sell work, which is
Yes.
something that most people in corporate have never seen. They've never
Mhm.
had to think about how to scope a project. If I asked you, how long does it take to do a business plan or how long does it take to do a marketing plan? Can you tell me how many days, weeks, months, and resources and money that's going to take?
Yeah.
What are the steps to do it? I think the thing corporate shields you from is any sense of being discreet about each of the things that you do, because technically, and you do this as an entrepreneur, it's the
Mhm.
same. You do things during the day that
Yes.
are administrative. You're putting
Hmm.
putting paper in the printer, and
Yes.
then, you're
Mhm.
making some coffee, and then you're writing your book. Like
Yes.
you just go up and
Done
down
all those
all
today.
day,
Yes.
right? At different levels, at the
Hmm.
different job
Yeah.
levels, right? If
Hmm.
you were
Right.
several people.
Right.
And I think what gets lost in there is, really understanding what it takes to do that, understanding the hurdles, understanding the
Mhm.
personalities involved. So there's a lot of stuff that goes around
Mhm.
consulting because I think people also can mistake the fact that something is a good idea.
Mhm.
You might have a dent in your car.
Mhm.
And if I sell fixing dents, it's a perfectly correct idea that I should
Yeah.
fix the dent in your car.
Right.
Like, there is a
Right.
dent, it needs resolving.
Needs fixed.
But
Yeah.
if you're not urgent about the dent, we're
Hmm.
never going to do business.
Hmm. Yeah.
We never will. And it doesn't
Has to be
mean
that
that it's
need.
not right
Mhm.
that your car
Yes.
is in fact
Hmm.
dented.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to kind of understand that,
Yeah.
understand the urgency in a
Hmm.
client you want to work
Hmm.
with. So, what I always suggest to people who are thinking about that, I mean, I am a believer in, trying to figure out what that core value is. I think there's
Hmm.
nothing like understanding in your gut that you can
Hmm.
generate value from something that you know how to do and that someone will pay you for that.
Hmm.
I think it's incredibly empowering. And it's
Yes.
important to try and find it, but I do
Hmm.
think it's worth spending time with someone who's been in this game for a while. It's not just a book and it's not just
Right.
start a website and start.
Hmm.
I think you really need to spend some time even partnered up with someone who knows this and get a few laps, a few laps under your belt. I know people who've tried and just
Mm.
couldn't do it, just couldn't do the
Yes.
sales part or
Hmm.
um, couldn't deal with the gaps of time sometimes between projects or whatever it is.
Right.
It's not that easy, and again, just having a specialty
Hmm.
isn't the only thing that'll carry you through, but it's absolutely worthy to spend the time thinking about what is the thing I could carve out and sell on the open market that adds value.
Yes.
How does what I do add value? How does my
Right.
perspective, how does my unique perspective, even asking yourself, what are things that you're just incredibly passionate about?
Hmm.
A lot of
Right.
people, move into an area because they just are, not that it's not even about being a hobbyist, but if you are someone who goes to restaurants a lot, I'm making this up,
Hmm.
and you go to every restaurant in town and you have opinions, like
Hmm.
you care about this more
Right.
than most people do. You've kind
Yeah.
of put in the 10,000 hours against a
Hmm.
particular
Or
topic.
more. Yes.
Or more.
Always
Yeah,
say more.
it could
Takes
be
more.
something that's in your just in
Right.
your wheelhouse that you know. If
Mhm.
you're a cyclist, you know every bit of equipment. Could
Mhm.
you potentially go back to a cycling company and say,
Mhm.
"Maybe I could be, someone that works in your stores as an ambassador for the brand?"
Right. 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 There are
Making
so
stuff.
many options. So
But
many
yeah,
options.
I mean,
Yes. Huh?
but really teasing those things out, but
Mhm.
really thinking about things that really excite you and that
Yes.
you have a depth of opinion about.
Yeah.
I usually say this too to college students who say they wanna
Mhm.
go into consulting. I tell them, "Well, go consult." Go
Yeah.
into your
Figure it
college
out.
town, go to the
Yep.
local restaurant, the diner. Do they have a slow night on Tuesdays for something? They don't know why, and
Mhm.
say, "Well, let me try and figure that out."
It
Like,
out.
figure out a way to ask
Mhm.
questions, interview people,
Mhm.
and then if you can figure out a solution on Tuesday night with a coupon
Mhm.
or a 2 for 1,
Mhm.
consult.
Yep.
Go start solving problems
Mhm.
for people. That's the
Yeah.
essence of it.
I like that word, solving problems, because that's what you're doing as a
Always.
consultant.
Always.
And you're not only solving problems for your clients, but also for your clients. So you're just, you're kind of doing that kind of down the road for them as well. And that seems to be another sort of habit of, asking those questions or just putting those steps into place. Because sometimes, when you're going into that, you're thinking, and I know that sort of feeling of that insecure voice of going out, because I've faced those going out on some of the stages, thinking, okay, are they going to like me? Or, okay, hope I don't trip. All these things that you're going through your head, and you're in an arena. So, and it's big and the lights and you can't see anybody. So there's those little insecure voices that come in. So, but what sort of habits have you implemented and that you suggest maybe to some of your clients or some of those of those associates that you work with that are helpful in kind of surpassing those because you've felt the same sort of things and as you've shared, and so how do you deal with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I've done, a couple things come to mind. First of all, I think as we talked about sort of as you're mining for your superpowers, I mean, you really do need to be selective about who you let in to
Okay.
your psyche and give you
Hmm.
feedback. I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of terrible feedback out there.
Okay.
I'm very discerning about what I take and what I throw away. And and
Hmm.
if that makes me err a little bit on the side of being a little bit insular, I'll take it
Hmm.
versus letting other people whipsaw me,
Yeah.
about what it is that where my strengths and weaknesses are. And so I
Right.
think one
Right.
habit, one thing you can
Hmm.
do is ask the right people for
Yes.
advice. Some people go back to the
Yes.
same well for everything. They ask their
Hmm.
sister, they ask their brother about everything,
Yes.
about the
Yes.
dent in
You're
the
right.
car, about marinara sauce,
Right.
about my
Right.
job, about my marriage.
Right.
Why how is any one human being the source of
Right.
knowledge for all
Right.
things
Right.
for those things, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's one bit of it. The other thing that I've said, and this has come up specifically with people who've said to me, I'm
Hmm.
dealing with, these voices in my head. I walk into the room and I'm the only one, or I'm the youngest 20
Yes.
years, or
That's
and I can't, and so
mhm,
all this brain time is being
mhm,
taken on all these questions. I said to a young woman once who said, I'm the youngest by
mhm,
far. I'm the only woman in this room. And I said,
mhm.
do you ever think about the fact that maybe all the other older men in the room are asking themselves the same question when you walk in?
Oh,
They very well might be going,
mhm,
okay, what have I done wrong that this wonder kid is here?
mhm,
She just came out of nowhere and she's sitting at
mhm,
the table with me as my peer or my superior.
mhm.
They're probably having some feelings as well when you walk in,
Interesting.
that are insecure. They could also be
Okay.
having negative feelings, as you said.
Yeah.
They could also be like, "Well, who is she? She's a kid.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna listen to her." There are all kinds of feelings in that room.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you're giving into the
Mhm.
one set that says that they're not taking you seriously, when in fact,
Mhm.
what I've learned is that sometimes by being the different one in the room, that's its own kind of interesting superpower,
Uh-huh.
especially when you're doing strategy, especially when you're there to help people think outside of the box.
Mhm.
I
Right.
better be different. I mean, I it
Mhm.
really came to understand this at Deloitte as I moved quickly through a lot of
Mhm.
different
Right.
circumstances. The more different I was and leaning into the fact that, look, I couldn't fit in if I wanted to. I wasn't going to fit in.
Yes.
I'm different in a lot of ways.
Right.
But I started to realize that they were appreciating in some ways the fact that I
Mhm.
didn't come from a perspective that looked like everybody at the table.
Right.
And so I think if I had stayed another 10 years, I'd probably be in white robes and and have a
A
have a
little
little
halo.
scepter, and yeah, I'd be like Glinda the Good Witch. I'd just come in
Yes.
a bubble and, have
Oh,
this
fun.
conversation. I
Mhm.
I realized that it was an asset that I don't see things the way you do. It's not always an
Interesting.
asset. I mean, a
Mhm.
lot of times it can be the source of
Mhm.
persecution, but in a lot of settings, it was like, I clearly you know things I don't know. Clearly you
Yes.
have a point of view and a life experience that's different.
Mhm. Yes.
And finding people who find that
Mhm.
fascinating and wanna learn from that became
Mhm.
a way that I built a long career in consulting in rooms that I'm pretty sure I never would have been promoted into, but
Yes.
but I was invited in to offer that outside opinion,
Yes.
right?
That's great. That's great. I think that's a wonderful, be it attitude. You just really have to do that self talk and self
Absolutely you
leadership.
do.
Adds just a lot of that, because then as we're going to kind of hit on office politics. Now, see, I was a part of a little bit more of a politics because I worked at a university as well,
Very
and
lots of
so
politics
there's
at universities, Deborah, almost more than
yeah. You
corporate.
know what?
Right.
I enjoyed working, I did this raising kids, so I did a ton of different things. That's why I did, that sort of teaching is, some teaching part-time, very part-time. But I
Mhm.
liked the junior colleges a little bit because they were just less political. You start getting more political, although I got grants with the universities. But there's that part that you just have to deal with that. It's just going to be part of it. And with that mindset and coming in with your own sort of confidence. But there's some of that office politics right now we can kind of blame that on, the downsizing and the
Mhm.
change and everything going on. And I think there's a mindset that many of us need to take of being an entrepreneur in whatever place that we're at. And we, I mean, whether we are a part of a company or whether we're on our own, we still have that entrepreneurial mindset. That's very important. I speak about that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, what does it take really to deal with that and then even to pivot? Because that's a harder pivot than being a lifetime entrepreneur and doing those changes. What are some of your opinions there?
Yeah, you've hit on something so important, and I love that you talk about this in your work that, that entrepreneurial mindset, and I say that it's akin a little bit to a consulting mindset.
Mhm,
One of the things that I've learned in my slalom is I bring that same sense of, okay, what's the end game? What's the deliverable? What's the
mhm,
value we're going to create? I think in these pods of
mhm,
value and in sprints of value, even when I'm in a full-time role. I
right.
don't get caught in just the big waves of I'm doing everything. I try to keep tabs on each project and keep tabs on, what the expected outcomes are. What do we need for this thing to accomplish, and how will we know we've won when we
Mhm,
get there? And so you're hitting on something really important about, I think entrepreneurs have to be, at 40,000 feet and 10 feet
mhm.
simultaneously. So
Yes.
I think it means that, in practice, what you're doing is
Mhm,
keeping your eyes open at all times. It
mm,
could be the case that the thing that you're doing is going to be phased out in a
mm,
company. I mean, a and sometimes that's appropriate. It's
mhm,
actually it might be bad for you in the short term because
mhm,
it's obviously a job, it's obviously your livelihood, but a company saying, "We're divesting from this kind of business or this line of business
mhm,
because it doesn't fit and we need to consolidate,"
mhm.
can make logical strategic
Right.
sense,
Sense.
but you don't
Right.
wanna be blindsided by that, right?
No.
You
Yeah.
you
Right.
wanna if you I was just, sharing with, a roundtable group that I consult with, about the Kodak case study, like, we just used it
Right.
as an example.
That's a big deal.
In
Yeah.
the 1990s, Kodak I just happen to have these stats in my head, they had
Mhm.
90% market share for film.
Yes. Yes.
Kodak also created the digital camera, ironically.
Yes.
By 2012, they were gone.
Mm.
And I'm sure there
Yeah.
were a lot of very, very smart, capable
Right.
people that were improving film and thinking about how it's positioned and coming up with the next
Mhm.
innovation.
Mhm.
And in the end, it was just going over a cliff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 'Cause
And
they didn't
and
embrace it.
and
Mhm.
how terrible for someone to have had their head down, working hard,
Right.
doing all the right things to build that business,
Mhm.
and then just getting the rug pulled out from under them with digital
Mhm.
film, like, that was what was next, and they tried to make a pivot at the
Mhm.
very last hour, but it was over. Cameras were on
Yeah.
phones, cameras were everywhere.
Yeah.
So, one of the reasons for that entrepreneurial scan of the market that you talk
Mhm.
about is
Right.
to just be keeping a finger on the pulse of
Yeah.
what's
Yes.
happening.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that upends an entire company, and
Mhm.
it breaks my heart to think that there were people who were shocked and amazed
Yes.
that their company was gone the day they put the lock on the door at Kodak.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
It was happening, and it was out there, and they
Mhm.
probably had camera phones in their
Yes, they probably did. Yeah, they already
and they
had that
probably had
going.
plenty of pictures of their friends on a phone, and it just didn't
Uh,
occur to them. So, I think you make such a great
mm,
point. I think
mm.
trying to adopt, even if you're not trying to start a business,
Right.
entrepreneurs have to be very, very aware
Yeah.
of
Of
market
what's going on.
conditions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might be market conditions 2 or 3
Mhm.
things away from you.
Mhm.
Think about what we're dealing with tariffs. Think about what we're
Yes,
dealing with
exactly.
energy. You may not think of
Mhm.
yourself as I follow news about energy and logistics
Yeah.
things,
Right.
but guess what? It's gonna
Mhm.
cascade
Right, right,
completely down to you in your
right.
business no matter what you do.
Yeah,
And
I think it's
so,
important.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have to now, be a student of all business. You have to, like, if you
Right.
wanna play in the business space, you have to pay
Yes.
attention to everything that's happening in business,
Yes.
even if it's not in your industry. There's so many, not only things that create consequence downstream, but that you can
Mhm.
learn from by crisscrossing things.
Yes, yes, Slaloming.
Slaloming, right? Well, another distinction that I think's relevant here, I talk about all the time the difference between invention and innovation, and we
Okay.
sort of we conflate these 2 things a lot.
Mhm,
But invention really is creating from scratch, something the world has
mhm.
never seen
Right.
before, and it's relatively rare.
Mhm,
Innovation is combining 2 things. Starbucks was innovation. Starbucks didn't create coffee, but
mhm,
Starbucks said coffee plus a 3rd
mhm,
place
mhm.
and a
Yes.
cafe experience and
Mm.
some consistency to that wherever you go in the world, very much like
Yes.
McDonald's did with
Mhm.
hamburgers, right? So
Right.
that's the concept and that's the innovation. And so
Yes.
I think what's accessible to more of us more than we
Mhm,
know, most of
mhm.
us don't come up with completely independent,
No.
completely never attached to anything ideas,
Mm.
but we can innovate and plug 2 things together,
Right,
plug 3 things in together and
right.
create an entirely new something. And I
Yeah.
think that's also a learned skill. Look at new
Mhm.
products that come out. Why
Right.
did that thing eclipse the other thing? Why did
Mhm.
that take off?
Yep.
You could just drive around any city and look at the pop-up things that gain
Right.
traction on Instagram or on
Right.
TikTok, where there are people lined up around the block.
Right.
And it's probably not something
It's
completely
not gonna be
new,
new. No.
but it's a coffee, a drink,
Right.
a pastry. The cronut was a thing for a while,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Ask yourself, like, what happened that
Mhm.
displaced this other
Right.
thing? Why are people lining up there and not at this other place?
Right.
It becomes an orientation and kind of, again, a muscle
Yeah.
that you continue to build.
And a lot of songs are like that too. I mean, most songs and most composers, classical
Yeah,
composers, they're based on others. The
yeah,
songs, you look at the Bach chorales.
a
Well,
great point.
you've got you've got a lot of our major artists that have done based it all on some of those. And when you study those, you
Right.
oh, that's that progression. And so it's based on other things. And usually there's nothing new. Usually it's just there's going to be something based on that. So as we kind of tie this up in many ways, we've had such a great conversation and so many of these takeaways. Make sure if you're listening or if you're watching this on YouTube that you're getting the article that comes with this as well, because I will put some of the takeaways and plus I expand on some things with some resources. So, what is one thing that you want to leave our audience with? And then I'm going to have you give your information at the very end, too, how people can reach you. But what is one thing you'd like people to take away from listening today to this?
Yeah, I think the main thing, it sort of comes back to where we started, Deborah. I think the world is changing even faster than it was yesterday.
Yes.
Someone reminded me in a meeting, the models in AI are changing daily.
Yes.
Daily, they're flipping
Yes.
over and being additive, so
Mhm.
now is not the time to say, "Well, I think I'm gonna sit this out." I think there are a lot of places that won't change. I also like to think about the things that are
Mhm.
constants with us as humans,
Mhm.
but I think if there was ever a time to take one step to just start to move forward, to start breaking
Mhm.
out of old patterns, breaking out of old habits,
Mhm.
I think the best time to start is right now. And
Mhm.
in fact, some of those agents of change, like AI, can also
Yes.
be a thought partner
Right.
to help
Totally.
you
I
think
agree.
about what that thing is. I've used
I
AI
agree.
to just be a sounding board
Brainstorm.
and
Yes.
play
Brainstorm. Uh
things
huh.
back and brainstorm and, here are the
Perfect.
things I know how to do.
Yes.
I like this, and I'm great at that. What do
Mhm.
you think? I mean, you
Yeah.
can almost just ironically use
Yes.
it to help you think about it, but I would say don't waste another second. I mean, if you've got
Mhm.
time, you know, get something to write on, start
Yep.
sketching, start really thinking about just how you repurpose things that
Right.
all the things that we were talking about. What are
Mhm.
your superpowers? What drives you? What motivates you? And how do you just continue to add value in
Right.
this world that's flipping over?
Great.
No one's going to do that for you. So my
Yes.
advice is just,
Do the
go
work.
for it and do
Yep,
it.
yep. Do the work. Yes,
Yeah.
start. Oh,
Start the
that's great.
slalom.
Yes, start the slalom. Definitely, I love that, and I've, trademarked a little process
You've
called
already done it. Yeah, Claude has done
yes,
it
yes,
for you.
yeah,
It's already
no,
done.
but, core common denominator, and some of those things
Love it.
in there are just, finding out what you love, affirming your skills, affirming
Love that.
your competency, so important, and you can go from there, but you've gotta start. I loved your point. You've really got to, just start. People they're just waiting, and then, okay, so now a month goes by, and 2 months, and now a year has gone by, and now 5 years has gone by.
Yeah.
I so many. They just put stuff on hold, on hold. "Well, no, I'm not quite ready," or
Exactly.
whatever. Start.
Exactly.
Just get going. So, Alma, can you give some information? How can people, reach you or find out more about you? And I will have those links in the show notes, so nobody, be afraid that you can't, be able to find out more about you. Can you give that I like you to verbalize that if people are, just listening to this.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. The best thing to do is to go to my website,
Okay.
which is Rev, REV, which is
Mhm.
my company, rev.la. REV like Victor dot LA.
Okay.
Really simple. Got it a long
Very.
time ago, so I have a nice short URL.
I love
And you
it.
can find connects to find me. You can see more
Mhm.
about the work that I do.
Mhm.
I work independently now, running Rev full time. I've had Rev
Good.
for 20 years. And
Wow.
so we do a variety of things with
Mhm.
helping clients kind of move through exactly the kinds of things we're talking about now, helping brands do that. Some of it is kind of core marketing and creative work.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of things there, but Rev will give you a good overview of who I am and what I do. That's the easiest thing and the easiest place to find me.
Perfect. That is so easy. And I love the LA. And we are
Uh-huh.
both on the West Coast, so this is working great today. So
Exactly. I have to represent for my hometown.
of course, of course. Well, thank you so much. This has been delightful. For anyone looking to get the article, you can go, of course, to my website, but also you get our newsletter, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. I've got links everywhere. So you can get there, and it will be in the show notes as well. But to get that full article or see this on YouTube, people like to watch too. So that's kind of fun. That's why I've put out many of these on most of our podcasts now are on YouTube as well. Over 300, and I've done over 400 podcasts or more, and of course, been on many too. So you can find us anywhere. So thank you again, Alma, for being with us today. What very very fun conversation, and hopefully, there's a lot of people listening to this of just saying, I need to start now. I need to go now. I'm going to start slaloming. I'm going to start asking questions. I'm going to start pulling on my superpowers and to be able to adjust to whatever situation there is, real life situation, not just the book learning. So thanks again. And
Absolutely.
for everyone listening, thank you for joining us. And I will look forward to being with you again next time. So bye bye for now. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I love bringing you insights to help you maximize your skills, resources, and experience at mid-career and beyond, so that you can make your next chapter your most impactful and purposeful yet. I'm Deborah Johnson, and I can't wait to be with you again next time on the Power of After show.